Why is Passover the purpose of creation? Why are the ideas that we celebrate in a few days the reason that the entire world was created and what God wants from existence? So let's discuss that. To answer this question, I would like to learn together a famous Ramban on Parshas Bo. The Ramban, Nachmanides, was one of the foremost commentaries on the Torah and the Talmud who lived in the 1200s and 1300s, around that time in Spain. And he addresses what is so important about Passover, what is so important about the leaving of Egypt, why is so much in the Torah associated with leaving Egypt. If we take a look and we think about it, we have a mitzvah, a commandment to remember leaving Egypt every day, not only on Passover. Every single day of the year, we have a mitzvah, a commandment to remember the Jewish people leaving Egypt. Also, when we make Kiddush on Friday night, we mention leaving Egypt. And now we have a whole holiday of Passover that discusses leaving Egypt. Not only that, he's going to say that the punishment for violating certain laws on Passover are extremely severe. They incur the Caries Penalty. The Caries Penalty is a spiritual punishment that somebody gets where his soul is disconnected from Hashem. Every Jewish soul is connected to God's throne and is directly connected to the creator of the world. However, there's a punishment called Caries where he loses that connection. Hello. Hi, Scott. Just saying hi to my cousin. So, the punishment for eating leavened bread on Passover is Caries, losing the spiritual connection. Also, there used to be a Korban Pesach, a Paschal lamb that was sacrificed in the temple, and someone who didn't do that would get the Caries, a punishment. And it's only one of two positive commandments that incur the Caries punishment. The other one is a bris, someone who doesn't perform a bris milah. And we know how serious that is. So why is the leaving of Egypt stressed so much in Judaism? Why are so many of our commandments associated with it? And why are the punishments for not keeping those commandments of Passover, which have to do with the leaving of Egypt, so serious? So the Ramban writes that back in the day, the world was heretical. The world didn't believe in God. And he writes that there were three primary heretical beliefs that people held that rejected God. One was, people said there's no God. They were total atheists. They believed there was no creator of the world, and the world was just here. God doesn't exist. Number two, they believed that there was a God. However, they believed God created the world and he left. He has nothing to do with it. He doesn't know what's going on. Number three is that God knows what's going on. He created the world, but he doesn't get involved. He takes a back seat. Interestingly, this was the opinion of Thomas Jefferson, who was a deist. He believed in God, but he did not believe that God had anything to do with the world, and there were no such thing as miracles. I believe you can still buy the Jeffersonian Bible, where he just leaves in all the moral lessons and takes out anything supernatural that was mentioned. So we have these three heresies that existed in the world. One, there's no God. Two, there is a God, but he doesn't know what's going on. Three, God knows what's going on, but he doesn't get involved. So what happened? We have here a people, the Jewish people, who were slaves in Egypt. What happened in the leaving of Egypt, which we're going to discuss in a few days? God does miracles to punish the people who are oppressing the Jewish people. He did 10 plagues, miraculous plagues. We don't see every day or ever that the water turns to blood, or a plague of frogs, or total darkness, or the firstborn of every house should die, or the Red Sea split. God is involved and does all of these miracles. So at the leaving of Egypt, he demonstrated that all three heresies that people believed were false. He showed that, one, God obviously exists. Two, he knows what's going on. And three, he gets involved in the world. He gets involved in the world and he punished the oppressors, the Egyptians, and he rewarded those who prayed to him and those who suffered, the Jewish people. So through the leaving of Egypt is the central idea of Judaism, which is what we preach and how we're an Or L'Goyim, how we are a nation of priests. Giving an example to the world is that we proclaim to the world that God exists and that he's involved in our lives. He's involved in our daily lives. Now, why so much emphasis on Pesach? So now I would like to read the actual text of the Ramban, at least part of it inside. Uba'avor, ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yasa osu mosif b'chol dor le'enei kol rasha kofer. Since God doesn't do a miracle for every evil person who wants, Yitzava osanu shenase tamid zichron va'os la'asher ro'u einenu. Therefore, he commanded us to remember and make a sign for what our eyes saw. Right? You often hear people say, "Oh, I would believe in God if He just did one miracle for me." That's not how God operates. God doesn't do a miracle for any wicked person. You could have someone who's been evil his entire life, and then he says, "Oh, if only God would do a miracle, then I would believe in Him." Who are you that God should do a miracle for you? So rather, what God did, how He wanted the world to operate, was He did at one time tremendous amount of miracles, and He commanded that the people who were involved and their children, those people should have mitzvos, have commandments to always remember what their eyes saw, and to teach it to their children, and their children to their children, and their children until the end of time. So we have commandments that the special mitzvah on the Seder to teach our children, right? It's unfortunately, usually you have at the Seder many generations together where the grandparents and the parents teach the children, but we can't have that this year for obvious reasons. But the idea is that the leaving of Egypt happened to us. It happened to our great-grandparents. This isn't a case where something happened and to somebody else and we're discussing it with our families. Rather, this happened to our ancestors. This is something which happened in our national history. Just like the United States of America, everyone who lives here, we know that Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, the Mexican War, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, all of these things happened because they're in the national consciousness. They're in the national consciousness of the United States. So too, the leaving of Egypt and the giving of the Torah is in the national consciousness of the Jewish people, and it's something which has been passed down. And since God doesn't do miracles for any evil person who asks Him, or anybody who asks Him every generation, therefore He did it one time in a major way, and He commanded us to always remember it. So we put on tefillin to remember what happened in Egypt. We have a commandment to remember it every day. We have Passover coming, where we have all these commandments: eat matzah, drink wine, teach what happened to your children, don't eat chametz, don't eat leaven. And we have all of these mitzvahs to reinforce these ideas. And he mentions how serious it is to violate the laws of Passover, which we mentioned. And he says we have a mezuzah on the door. Even the mezuzah on the door is meant to remind us of leaving Egypt. Mitzvahs rabos zeichotzias Mitzrayim. The reason for all these commandments that we're always talking about the Exodus and doing them to remember the Exodus from Egypt is that we should never forget what happened. So that the heretics shouldn't be able to contradict what happened. Somebody buys a mezuzah for a little bit of money, and he hammers it on his door, and he has in mind what it stands for. He already acknowledges and testifies to the fact God created the world, the fact that God exists and He's involved with the world. He gets involved with humanity. Also with prophecy. And he believes in every aspect of Torah. Not only that, he testifies when he puts up the mezuzah that God repays those that serve Him properly. And that He rescued the Jewish people because they're descendants of the forefathers who did tremendous things to worship God, and they did the right thing. So we can imagine every time we do a little mitzvah, like putting up a mezuzah, or especially the mitzvahs of eating matzah this Passover, we're not just doing a mitzvah, right? When we were kids, they used to tell us, do a mitzvah, it's a good deed. That's not what this is. Every time we do one of these mitzvahs, we're testifying and proclaiming these foundational ideas for what the world was created. We're saying God exists, He knows what's going on with us, and He's involved in our lives, and that He repays those that serve Him with kindness, and He does chesed with them. And he continues, Shekulan hamidus v'chavivus ma'od shebechol havezar ben tzakalit v'chamura, okay? And he writes, V'kavanas kol ha-mitzvos, the intent of all of the commandments in the Torah, Shenamid Belokeinu, we should acknowledge our God, V'noda elav shehu bareinu, and we should proclaim that He is our Creator. V'hu kavanas hayetzira, and that's the entire purpose of creation. The entire purpose of why God created the world is that His creation should proclaim that He is our Creator. She'ein lanu tam achar b'yetzia rishona, there's no other reason why God created the world. Ve'ein kel elyon chafetz b'tachtonim milvad sheyeda ha'adam, God only wants from us that we should acknowledge Him, V'yoda leilokav shebaro, and that He created us. V'kavanas rommus hakol b'tfilos. Why do we get together in synagogue? We get together in synagogue that we could proclaim together in a loud voice, to say that God created us. The reason we have synagogues, why we go together and pray, right? A lot of people are saying, oh, big deal, you could pray at home. You can't pray at synagogue. Obviously, right now we can't pray at synagogue, but we should realize what we're missing. The idea of a synagogue is that the entire Jewish community gets together and says, God, we're proclaiming in a loud voice that you are our creator and we are your children. That's why we have a synagogue. That's the only reason. And now, unfortunately, we're not able to go. We're not able to go to synagogue, and that should be something which is painful for us. Maybe when we realize what we've lost and not being able to go to synagogue, perhaps then God will cure this crisis and allow us to go back. So just to summarize, why is the leaving of Egypt so important? Why do we take it with such seriousness? Why is the holiday of Passover so serious? Why do we have so many commandments which remind us of leaving Egypt? Because when the Jewish people left Egypt, it demonstrated to the world that there is a God. He knows what's going on in the world, and He gets involved with our lives. He rewards those that trust in Him and do what He wants. And that's the entire purpose of creation, that we should all come together and acknowledge who God is and what He is, and especially now, as we go through these trying times where we see the normal human endeavors that we could do to solve any crisis and solve any difficult situation that we're in are pretty much worthless, and that the only being that we can really trust is God. And we should do our best, that we should have a happy Passover, and we should have these ideas become part of us, and we should all merit to have a very happy and healthy holiday.